Good afternoon and welcome to our 14th Export Talk. I'm Guilain Bredel, Area Manager at Brussels in charge of Middle East and North Africa. And the topic of our webinar today is particularly important. The global pandemic we are going through right now shows us the significance of online sales. And if online payments are profitable for local sales, they can also boost your international business. So I have the pleasure to welcome Julie Lupens today, strategic marketer and digital communication leader at the House of Marketing. Don't hesitate to ask her your question via the chat box during the webinar. I inform you also that next week on Wednesday at 4 p.m. We will organize another webinar regarding e-commerce, this time specifically to sell your products on the Turkish market. I will share you the link to register if you are interested. And before starting, we will just launch a small poll to see if you already launch an e-commerce. So if you already have a platform for your e-commerce, you have to select if yes or no. So I give you some seconds to answer this question. So the majority of you, it's a big majority, 76%, you are totally new to this business, so it will be particularly important. And so I give the floor to Julie to explain us the importance of e-commerce today.
Okay,
Julie,
thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this e-commerce barometer. So quickly, the rules of the game for today. I will ask you to mute yourself all the time, but normally it's already per default. I will also ask you not to use the video to keep the bandwidth under control, but that's also normally per default. The presentation will not be shared, so feel free to screenshot whatever you want. And of course, like Guilain already mentioned it, do not hesitate to ask questions and use the Q&A feature to be able to share your question with me and the other panelists. So I'm super happy to be your host today. Let me quickly introduce myself. So I'm Julie, I'm consulting manager at the House of Marketing, and I have more than 10 years experience in marketing and also in e-commerce. It's really my big passion. I have worked in a lot of different industries, B2B, B2C, in FMCG as well. So here you can see some companies I work for, so quite a lot of different type of industries, from FMCG to the banking, the energy sector, some startup as well, and also the automotive sector. Also, some more information about myself. So I'm married, I'm a mom of a 9-year-old boy. I love traveling during my free time with friends or with my family. I'll also try to run 2 days a week, but it's quite of complicated for me because I'm not disciplined at all, and I will always find an excuse not to go for a run. What I also like is art exhibition in general, and of course chilling with friends. So if you are looking for a nice art exhibition, I recommend you really the Lighthouse at Villepin. It's really a nice one. And yes, last but not least, my motto, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. So hopefully this will inspire you. But maybe a short introduction about the House of Marketing. So maybe some of you know already the House of Marketing. It's the #1 marketing consulting firm in Belgium. We deliver business impact through future-proof marketing for already more than 25 years now. And we support clients in different sectors, but also in different marketing areas. So it can be marketing consulting, interim management, trainings and coaching, or also organizing a workshop or interactive session within your teams. On this slide, you can see it's a little bit of vanity slide, as you can see. So you can see a small selection of our 150 happy customers. Again, here with a lot of different industries, B2B, B2C, in transport, in ICT, in healthcare, financial services. We are active for big corporates, like you can see on the slide, but also for startups and scale-ups in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and in Germany. But I think I spoke already enough about myself and about the House of Marketing. So let's now deep dive into the topic of today, so e-commerce. What I suggest is the following agenda. So first, I will explain you the e-commerce Belgium landscape, so with some key figures and insights. Then I will explain you how to develop your strategy in e-commerce at every level of maturity. You will see that there are 9 different options to start in e-commerce. Then I will develop the cross-border e-commerce. So what are the key challenges and best practices to succeed in your cross-border e-commerce strategy? And then some tips and tricks that hopefully will be very actionable for you to start as a web shop. And last but not least, some Q&A sessions as well. At every topic, at the end of every topic, do not hesitate to ask your question. You will see a kind of wrap-up slides. So this will be the time to ask your question on this specific topic. So let's start with the Belgium e-commerce landscape. I will now start with some key figures and trends. So hopefully you will follow me in those figures. The e-commerce barometer. So maybe some of you have seen the e-commerce barometer that was launched yesterday. So it's really new in the press. And at the House of Marketing, we have a lot of experience in e-commerce. So this year, it's the 5th edition of the e-commerce barometer together with Safe Shops. For those who don't know Safe Shops, it's the Belgium e-commerce association that promotes online shopping in Belgium. Maybe some of you are already member of Safe Shops. The report is quite unique because it maps out the online landscape using transaction data. So what do we mean by transaction data? What you can see a lot in the market are research based on consumer spendings, and most of the time those are estimation. Here we will really use, we have used data from payment service providers, so the PSPs, that are active in Belgium, and we focus on Belgium merchant. So the PSP that are active in Belgium, you can see it on the right side of the slide. So Worldline, Ingenico, that has been acquired by Worldline recently, MultiSafePay, Europabank, CCV, and Mboli. So like I said, I'm really happy to present you the report because it was launched yesterday. Maybe you saw already some press articles in the TED or l'Echo or RTBF. So we got a lot of attention because we have a very positive message to share about the Belgium e-commerce. So I hope you are quite curious about the data and the key learnings in 2020, a kind of really special year. The first key figure I want to share with you today is that in 2020, it was a historical and amazing year in terms of new web shops. It's a strange year too, like you can probably imagine. So 40% of the Belgian web shops started in 2020. How is this possible? Well, the biggest reason is probably COVID-19. So more than 20,000, and if you want an exact number, 20,094 web shops were created in 2020. So we reach a record number of almost 50,000 web shops active in Belgium. But maybe to be sure that we are aligned on the definition, what is a Belgian merchant? So a Belgian merchant has a Belgium online, has a Belgium VAT number, sorry, and they sell products or services via internet, so including mobile, of course. They also have a contract with a payment service provider, enabling them to accept those transactions. So it means that merchants like Coolblue or Bol.com, for instance, who can have a Belgium VAT number are not included in those figures because the main contract they have with their PSP is not a Belgium contract, but probably in this case a Dutch contract. So we really focus on Belgium companies with a Belgium contract with their PSPs. So how can we explain this amazing growth of 65%? Well, I already mentioned it. It's COVID-19 and the different lockdowns that forced Belgium consumers and Belgian merchants to close their physical stores or restaurants. So this made e-commerce more relevant than ever in Belgium. And it's also increased the new web shops and companies to really start selling online. So on average, so more than 20,000 new merchants, that's an average of 52 new merchants per day. That's really a lot. If you compare it to last year, I would say more 2 years ago, in 2019, there were only 14 new web shops per day. So from 14 to 52, that's really a big increase. But now let's have a look at those specific web shops. So as you can see on the graph, the micro segment and small segments were the most positively affected. That's quite obvious because the acceleration in digital adoption of consumers and the closure of non-essential shops have really boosted the number of new online merchants, especially in those segments. But here again, maybe I will need to explain you what are the different segments. So you can here see on the slide that you have occasional, micro, small, medium, and large. But let me quickly give you the definition of those segments. So what is an occasional merchant? Well, it's a merchant that has maximum 12 transactions per year. So that's really not a lot, but there is no minimum or maximum in terms of online revenue. So most of the time, you will have a kind of non-professional online merchant in this category, but you can also have some really niche players or like kind of new industry that started online. So think, for instance, about the automotive sector who kind of try to sell cars online. So it's kind of new, of course, but they can probably be in those occasional merchants as well. Then the second segment is the micro segment. So a micro merchant is a merchant with an online revenue of less than 100,000 euros, so 100K. A small merchant will have a revenue between the 100K and 1 million. Then for the medium segment, it will be a merchant with an online revenue between 1 million and 10 million. And by large merchant, large segments, those are merchants with a revenue of more than 10 million online. So that's a little bit the different segmentation in the report. So if you think about large merchant, to name a few well-known brands in Belgium, you have, for instance, VP, but also a lot of travel industry and ticketing companies, so entertainment basically. So almost 50,000 merchants, that's quite a competitive market. Like I mentioned, 52 new web shops created every day. Here you can see some examples that have been launched recently and especially during the first lockdown. 52 new players, it's a lot, but we know that the maturity level in Belgium is still not at the same level as other countries like the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, and even France. A lot of companies, Belgian companies, don't really have a web shop or really a web shop with transactional data. Here you can see that some started in a kind of survival mode. That's an example with Filigrane. They started quite quickly, but also step by step. So they started only with a limited product portfolio and with the first click and collect modus. So, but here, I think it's kind of important that if you want to survive in e-commerce, you have to invest in a strong customer experience, in a seamless journey for customers, in a frictionless payment environment, and so on and so on. We will see at the last part of my presentation some best practices to be a successful web shop. So the strong growth of the number of web shops, so remember it was a growth of more than 64%, did not really lead to an equivalent growth in transaction value. So by transaction value, I mean the turnover. For the first time in many years, the growth was a single digit, so it was a growth of 7.5%, so quite limited. But among others, this is due to a contraction in sectors like, again, the travel and the ticketing industry. Those sectors are normally generate a lot of amounts online and are also already quite digital in terms of activity. So this had a huge impact on the growth in general. So 7.5% of growth, that's almost 620 million extra revenue online. So that was still a very positive surprise for us because we expect not that much because of the crisis, of course. But what you can see is that e-commerce has gone from strength to strength the last 4 years, growing by more than 15% each year. So that's really, really important if you compare it to other countries where the growth is more between the 10 and the 15%. But again, here it's because of the maturity market in Belgium. So a growth that was really visible in 2020 from specific sectors. If you think maybe about specific sectors that have really popped up in e-commerce in Belgium, you probably think about the food sectors, the retailers of box food and so on. They really had an amazing growth in 2020. But also other sectors like online pharmacies, do-it-yourself products, sex toys, books, indoor fitness equipment, toys, fashion. Those sectors were really really successful in 2020. But there are also other sectors, and if you think more about the service industry, so like online banking, online education courses, online entertainment, social commerce have also a big growth in 2020. But of course, like I already mentioned, some had a really negative impact in 2020, and that's mostly the travel and the ticketing industry, as already mentioned before. So general growth of 7.5%. But let's see where the growth took really place. So again, here we have the segmentation with the occasional, micro, small, medium, and large segments. And what you can see on this slide is that the growth in online transaction value was really driven by smaller and medium segment, so the ones below the 10 million. That's really new because it was not the case in 2019. The growth was really driven by the large segment. So remember, I told you that the total growth was 620 million. If you really focus on those smaller segments, they grow by 735 millions. So it means that due to the decline in the large segments, so a -2%, and those large segments, of course, represent 64% of the total online value. So that's kind of easy to calculate. The total growth then was limited to 7.5%. So on the one hand, the transaction value in the micro segment grew by 68%, so quite in line with the growth in a number of new web shops. And on the other side, the large segments had a decline of -2%. So a very special year, like you can see. Let's now here do already a quick recap on the figures I already present you, but with a different angle now this time. So the first key figure to really remember is that 42% of all Belgium web shops started in 2020. That's really an amazing figure. Then the second one is 86% of Belgian web shop generated less than 100,000 euro turnover. And the last one to remember is that 3% of all Belgian web shops generated 83% of the total transaction value. So meaning that the biggest takes it all. I'm not sure. Let's continue our analysis to see the other figures. Now let's look at other figures like the number of transactions. So we saw the value and now we can see the number of transactions. That's also an important metric. So here, what you can see is with a total of 108 million transactions, we have really reached the symbolic mark of 100 million transactions. Last year, we were at 85 million transactions. So that's a growth of more than 27%. So almost 22 million additional transactions in 2020. That's an interesting growth, I think. But what does it mean exactly? It means that for me, consumers have made the greatest shift to online shopping. So 108 million transactions, that's represent on average 3.4 transactions per second. It seems to be a lot, but if you compare it to the big players like Amazon, who sell around 250 products per second, then I think there is still room to grow in Belgium. This pace won't slow down for a few reasons. The first is probably that there are more web shops, but there are also more industry that are more active online. Think about industry like the food, the pharmacy, but also in the B2B sector. They really start selling online in 2020. Then also another reason is that consumers, even older people, have really seen the benefits of online shopping. This is a kind of new normal for a lot of people. So they started to buy online, but also people who were already active online shop also more often online, with also smaller amounts, like we can see. And also, the third reason probably is that the barriers to shop online are quite smaller. So improvement of the shopping experience in general, the omni-channel experience that some can offer, the flexibility in delivery option, and also a general improvement of logistics and a higher competition in logistic partners. Also the use of technology like chatbots or using artificial intelligence or high personalization. Think also about other technologies like augmented reality. Those kind of things really help to have really a positive impact on e-commerce and offer a better user experience for consumers. Again here, let's have a closer look per segment to see where the growth was in the different segments. What you can see is that all segments grew in 2020, which confirm the trend that e-commerce is really thriving in Belgium. But even if large players are still taking a large piece of the pie, the smaller segments, so by smaller segments, you can see the occasional, the micro and the small segments, contributed really for more than 52% of the increase in the number of transactions. That's really a lot. So those three small segments added some 12 million additional transactions. That's really a lot. Now that we have the figures on the online revenue, the number of new web shops, the number of transactions, we can do some quick calculation. And that's, for instance, another key metrics in e-commerce that is quite important. It's the average basket value. And what we can see is increases in the number of transactions and in number of web shops, but a smaller increase in volume, only 7.5%, have led to a negative impact, if we can call it a negative impact, on the average basket value. So the average basket value was in 2020 82 euros. So all segments except the medium segment witnesses a decrease. So it was really an impact for all segments almost. So why this trend Of course, the rise of e-commerce in the commodity market. So by commodity, I mean the food, the pharmacy industries, but also the generalization of free delivery, for instance, the removal or even the decrease of the minimum order amount to get a free delivery. All those things have really removed barriers to shop, but had also a kind of negative impact on the average basket value. But this is not new. This decreasing in trend already started in 2019, but it was quite limited. The decrease in 2019 was only -4%. And here what you can see on the slide, so the decrease in 2020 was quite important. It was a decrease of -15%. But that really emphasizes by the impact of historically high basket value, like sectors of travel and the ticketing industry. Again, here, if you book a flight online, it will be probably be more than 300 or 500 euros. Another important Another important aspect of the report is the means of payment used by the consumers. So the Belgian culture is more used to debit cards. This is true as well in the offline world. Like you can see on the graph, 52% of all transactions, the same in terms of number of transactions, but also in terms of transaction value, is really about debit cards. So by debit card, we mean Payconiq, Bancontact, Maestro, and VP. But also credit cards are quite important with 42%. So by credit card, we mean, of course, MasterCard, Visa, Amex, and so on. And also the other payment methods that are used on Belgian web shops are PayPal, but quite limited, only 3.5% of the transaction value or transaction volume. But also an important thing to know about the different payment method is that when it comes to higher amounts, credit cards are used. The average spending are not the same. So for a credit card, the average spending will be 138 euros. And for debit cards, the average spending will be 80 euros. So it's an important information to know. Because if you don't offer the preferred payment method for your consumer, there is a high chance they won't convert. We will see it later in the cross-border part, but offering the preferred payment method is really key to convert. So that was the last learning of the e-commerce barometer. In terms of payment means, but let's now go to the peak moments. Of course, every industry is different. Understanding your brands and industry peak moments are really key. Why? Because then you can prepare your marketing plan. You can also have a look at the logistic aspect and so on. So you know when you start your campaigns on social media, for instance, you know when to expect higher traffic on your website, and you can then have a closer monitoring during those peak sales. But in general, here are the key trends you can see. So Monday was the day when most online transaction took place in 2020. Saturday and Sunday, on the opposite, were the least busiest day. We know that Saturday is still dedicated for offline shopping. Then in terms of month, November was the busiest month in terms of transaction and in terms of revenue as well. March was the calmest month in terms of transaction. That's also something quite a surprise, yes and no, because in March, well, it started mid-March exactly. It was the first lockdown, so there were a lot of uncertainties and home working as well. So people didn't spend time to shop online because of those uncertainties. And yes, like you can see also on the slide, Black Friday was the busiest day for online with more than 7 transactions per second. So remember, on average, we had like 3.4 transactions per second. So a Black Friday is the double of transaction. What we can really see is that 7 days of the top 10 busiest days in 2020 are really linked to Black Friday and Cyber Monday week. So it's really a key momentum for Belgium consumers as well. What we can also say about Black Friday last year is that it was really popular for other reasons as well. The shops were still closed at that moment, and people were quite worried about their Christmas shopping, the Sinterklaas gifts, and so on. So they also had the challenge encounter by the logistic partners. So we saw a lot of media attention about logistic issues in Belgium, but also cross-border. So people went massively online to shop their gifts and also be sure that they were delivered on time. And on the opposite, March the 15th, that was also the first lockdown weekend in Belgium, was the calmest day with less than 2 transactions per second. I hope you are still with me. It's a lot of figures, a lot of data, but hopefully with those figures, you now have a clear view on the Belgium e-commerce landscape. If you want to have more insights, you can download the report on our website. As I mentioned, it has been published yesterday. In this report, you can find, of course, the key figures, but also some business insights to explain you the different trends, but also some actionable tips and tricks from e-commerce experts. That's also something new this year. Why? Because it's the 5th edition, so it's a special edition. So we decided to do some interviews with some key players on the Belgium e-commerce landscape. So you can also see in the report, but also on our website, e-commerce podcast series with 5 different interviews of companies like Casidomi, Chef Basket, that's really a small merchant, but also Too Good To Go, VP, and Overstock. So hopefully you can find more insights on those 2 different sources.
Julie?
No, yes.
Yeah, is it the end of your first part? Can I have some questions from our participant. Can I ask it?
Yes, indeed. That's the last part of the e-commerce landscape.
Okay, so a first question was regarding one of your first slide, I think. On a slide, you show that 3% of companies are doing 83% of the chiffre d'affaires.
The turnover, yes.
The turnover, indeed. Yes. And the question is, what are those companies? Quelles sont ces entreprises qui font 83% du chiffre d'affaires?
Yes, that's a good question, but unfortunately, I can't really tell you what are the companies behind those figures, because we work with a payment service provider and they only provide us with consolidated data. So of course, they are not going to share confidential data of turnover of their company, their clients.
And another question regarding the return policy. It's can I not accept the returning of goods? Donc, rétractation de 14 jours for precious metals and stones. This is a really specific question regarding la loi de rétractation de 14 jours.
Yes, that's indeed a really specific question. I'm really sorry, but I can't really help. I'm more focused on e-commerce and the marketing aspects. So for legal question, I'm probably not the right person to answer this.
We'll check with, and we will answer it, yes, later. So yeah, let's continue.
Okay, thanks. So hope you are still with me. Know you know everything about the Belgium e-commerce landscape. It's now important to see how you can then develop your e-commerce strategy. Your e-commerce strategy will depend on the level of maturity of your business. So let's go to the next slide so I can explain you what I mean by maturity level as well. So at the House of Marketing, and that's also the case for a lot of consulting companies, we love frameworks, canvas, templates, and so on. So naturally, we developed a specific framework for e-commerce. As you can see, there are three main strategies for brand to sell online. That's what you can see on the left side of the slide. So for each main strategy, you have also three different options with a different level of brand control. So from no brand control to a full control, you can see the different options. This brings us then to 9 different strategies for companies or brands to sell online. On the left side of the slide, it's the lowest degree of e-commerce maturity, so what we call the basic level. In the middle, it's what we call the excellence level, and on the right side, well, here we really speak about a leadership level. In the next slide, I will go through those different options to explain you, of course, more in details. I will first start by giving you the definition of the main strategy. So what is an e-tailer, marketplace, and direct to consumer, and also explain you for each main strategy the pros and cons of those three strategies. So let's go. The first one is the e-tailer. So what is the definition of an e-tailer? An e-tailer sells products from various brands and manufacturers through an online storefront, and the inventory is kept in the e-tailer warehouses. As you can see, the e-tailer, so in red on the slide, is a middleman between the company and the consumer. There is no direct interaction between the company and the consumer. The company delivers the product to the e-tailer and gets paid for it. And what happens then is that what you can see on the left side of the slide is that the e-tailer will sell the product at a higher price to the end consumer. So that's basically how it works. An example of an e-tailer is Fox & Company, for instance. They don't develop toys themselves, but sell toys from different brands like Jeko, Abba, Lilliputien, and so on. So they buy the toys from those different brands and companies and resell it to the end customers at a higher price on their own web shop. So now that you understand the model, let's see the pros and cons. But before going to the pros and cons, another example as well is quite a well-known example is MediaMarkt. So the pros and cons of this first strategy, so the e-tailer, the key message of this strategy is that e-tailer takes care of traffic generation and logistics, while brands should excel at online visual merchandising. So it means that if you decide to go for this model, you will need to provide great pictures, videos, product description, and really have like engaging content to make sure that you convert on a high rate on the e-tailer website. But of course, collaborating with e-tailer means less investment, but also less control. So you are operating on a kind of rented land with an e-tailer. But first, let's deep dive into the pros. The first advantage in this model is, of course, the reach. So the e-tailers drives traffic to the website. So the whole, you will have access to the whole customer base for your product. So some consumers buy directly from well-known e-tailers, and they will also do their research on those specific e-tailers. So they are not going to search on Google, but maybe some of them will directly go to the e-tailer website. Consumers might look also because it's kind of easy and they know the e-tailer, they love the brand or whatever other reason. A second advantage we see in this model is logistic. So the management and the shipment of those goods or services are handled by the e-tailer itself. A third advantage of this model is the setup and the maintenance costs that are covered by the e-tailer. They will have to hire people to maintain and build the web shop, and they will need also like technical know-how and skills to develop their platform. So no technical setup and maintenance cost on your side if you decide to work with e-tailer. Probably some cost for the connection and some cost for the configuration that has to be taken into consideration. But of course, there are some disadvantages to sell through an e-tailer. Like I already mentioned, there is no setup and maintenance cost because those are covered by the e-tailer, but there are other costs that you will have to take into account, like the loss of part of your margin as well, and probably also a cost for visibility on their website. So if you want to be visible on an e-tailer website, you will have to pay for it. It's the same we will see for the marketplaces. A second big disadvantage of this model is that you are not the owner of your customers' data. So it means that you are not supposed to have those email addresses to do some upselling, cross-selling campaigns or whatever you want to do with those data. But I strongly recommend companies or brands that want to work with e-tailers to include in their contract to have access to the customers' data, a kind of data sharing policy. It will be limited, but it will help you to understand who is your consumer and maybe also start a more segmented communication towards your consumers. Then another big disadvantage is, of course, the competition. You are in direct competition with your biggest competitors on the website. Then a last disadvantage we see with this model is less control. So what I mean by less control is if the e-tailers goes bankrupt, for instance, it will have a huge impact, of course, on your revenues. It's also the e-tailer who choose your product assortment. The e-tailer will also decide on the price and the promotions. The consumer of the e-tailer must be really a fan of your brand. So you need to have a kind of buy-in from the e-tailer. Otherwise, your products won't be visible on their website. And another important in terms of control is that the e-tailers control the whole customer experience, which should be consistent, of course, but seamless and focus on conversions. So that's also a criteria to take into account when you do the selection of your e-tailers, to see if they really invest in the customer experience. And last but not least, it's also important to ask yourself the question, does the website of the e-tailer fit with your brand? If you have a premium product, you don't want to be visible on a cheap looking e-tailer, for instance. That's also something you need to ask yourself. I hope this is clear for the e-tailer. The next is the marketplace. So what is the definition of a marketplace? A marketplace is an online virtual place where sellers and buyers meet to exchange goods and services. The exchange usually takes the form of transaction managed by the marketplace operator. So here again, there is a middleman, the marketplace, between the company and the end consumer. So that's what you can see in red. The company will have to pay a fee to sell its product on the marketplace. And depending on the marketplace and what you prefer as a brand, you can choose to send the product to the end customer or send it to the marketplace, and the marketplace will keep it until the goods have been sold. So there are different options according marketplaces. If you think about some marketplaces, here you can see on the slide popular marketplaces per continent. In Belgium, the most popular marketplaces are Amazon and bol.com. Unfortunately, we don't have a Belgian marketplace, but also there are other marketplaces that are quite popular in Belgium. If you think about ASOS, about Sarenza, about VP, Booking.com, Coolblue, Zalando, and so on. So you really have a lot of different marketplaces active in Belgium. Let's now have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of the marketplace model. The main message here is that the marketplace are a really super interesting model to kickstart your e-commerce growth. But I will say only if your brand is already built. Because otherwise it will be quite a challenge to be visible on the marketplace. I will explain you more in details why it's really important to have your brand already built. So the first advantage of the marketplace model is, of course, like for the e-tailer, the reach. So marketplaces drive a lot of traffic, and you have immediate access to a lot of potential buyers. So that's good news. Here as well, some people search directly on the marketplace and not on Google, for instance. So customers really trust the marketplaces, and they provide also a good and quick experience for consumers. Another big advantage of the marketplaces are the logistics. So some marketplaces give you stock and ship options, so it's really useful, and it's also a good opportunity to really start serving your clients abroad. So it makes cross-border much easier to start with. And here as well, you don't have to cover the setup and maintenance cost. The technical know-how, the people, like for the e-tailers, will not be a cost for you if you choose to work with marketplaces. And also there are some costs as well to take into consideration, but there are a lot of companies that really helps you to manage your marketplace accounts. From the setup to a full management, there are different options to help you to really crack to be successful on a marketplace. And also a last advantage is that some marketplaces will send you your data and insights from your customers. So here again, you are not the owner of those data, which is a disadvantage, of course, but you cannot do some email campaigns, but you can really, with the data, have a better understanding of your customer needs and expectations, and also create some segments and persona, for instance. Then in this model, you also have some disadvantages. The first one is that you don't have any brand control. So you are operating again, like for the e-tailer, on a kind of rented land. So you are subject to comply with the different marketplaces, the rules and changes that the marketplaces will do. And also you need to know that every marketplace has his own rules and changes. So besides the marketplace branding, it will be really in front for the consumers and center, so you don't really build brand awareness through a marketplace. So you have little control on your brand image in general. I also mentioned the costs. So I already mentioned the cost to be present on a marketplace. You can work with agency, but you can do it yourself as well. But there are also other costs to take into consideration, and those costs are linked to visibility. So of course, you want to be visible on a marketplace, so they will ask you some additional fees. It's a little bit like on Google, you pay for AdWords. The same happen on a marketplace. If you already have your own web shop and you want to sell on a marketplace, you can really connect your web shop with the marketplace. But to do this, you will also have some additional cost to implement it and work, for instance, with kind of APIs to make it easier and a kind of automated process to update your product catalog or even your pricing, to be sure that there is consistency between your web shop and the marketplace as well. And yes, already something I mentioned for the e-tailer is the high competition. So of course your competitors will also use marketplaces to promote their items, and consumer usually search online also for the lowest price. So this is also a big disadvantage to be present on a marketplace. Also, another one that is not mentioned on the slide is the relationship with the other e-tailers. So if you decide to work with e-tailers but also with marketplaces, the e-tailers, they won't probably be happy that you are also working with marketplaces, because they see marketplaces as the biggest competitors. So you can expect some negative reaction from them. Now let's have a look at the third strategy, the direct to consumer one. So in this model, the consumer buy directly from your company on your brand's website with no e-tailer or no marketplaces as middlemen. So that's kind of the easy model. But of course, in this model, the key message to remember is that the direct-to-consumer e-commerce business model requires a high IT and audience building investment, but you will have the benefits to have a full control of your brand, and also higher margin, because you don't have like the fees from the e-tailer or for the marketplaces. But let's go more in details about the advantages and disadvantages of this direct model. So the first advantage, and probably the biggest one, is the brand control. You can really build a relationship with your customers. Another one is the data. You are the owner of your data, so you can do whatever you want, or almost whatever you want with the data, and promote other products, have a brand awareness campaign, personalization, cross-border, cross and upselling campaigns, or whatever you want to do with your consumers. Also, another advantage is that you are full control of your price. So greater profit margin, you don't have the cost of e-tailer or marketplaces, like I already mentioned it. Another one is no out of stock situation and full collection that can be available. So you really decide which kind of product you want to promote online. And you also have like remarketing possibilities, retargeting, because you really own the customer data. And another advantage is also that you are not dependent on third parties like marketplaces or e-tailers. But on the other side, you have some disadvantages as well in this model. The first one is the financial investment that is required to start your web shop. Of course, you can start a web shop in 30 days, but it will probably be a kind of basic web shop. So if you really want to offer a great customer experience and also drive traffic to your website, you will probably need to invest more. What is also an important aspect is logistics. So you will need to organize for logistics or outsource it to a third party. That's most of the time the case. And also another one is you will have to look out for also the relationship with other e-tailers. So for instance, if you have your own web shop but you also work with e-tailers, then they will probably don't be happy as well if you have an additional sales channel. So that's less revenue for them, of course. And another one is the brand building. So again, here, ask yourself the question, why would your consumers go to your platform that is single branded instead of going to a marketplace or an e-tailer where they can find other brands and from different companies as well. So that's really key as well to see if there is an interest of your consumer to go on your specific web shop. Also an important one is for the brand building. I already mentioned it, you need to drive traffic, awareness, And you need to know that online consumers are quite loyal, even more than in the offline world. In the online world, consumers have a kind of short list of websites, web shops they often buy from, but then it means that it's key to get on that list, according to your industry, of course. So if we go back to the template, the framework in e-commerce, now you see that we already tackled the y-axis, so the one on the left side. But you see that there is also a x-axis with the different option. So here I will explain you the different option and what it means exactly in terms of control. So the first one was e-tailers. You can see that you have 3 options. You can choose to work with them or not with e-tailers. If you choose to work with them, you can decide whether you make a selection of e-tailers or not. No specific selection of e-tailers. It means that every e-tailer who wants to sell your products online is allowed to do it. So meaning no control of price, no control of brands. And it's also difficult for consistency with your brand image and so on. So this is really a lack of control. Then the second one was the marketplaces. Here again, 3 different options. You can choose to put your product yourself on the marketplaces, or everyone that wants to sell your product. So think about e-tailers that are also present on marketplaces can do it as well. You can do again a selection of those online agents that are allowed to sell your goods on marketplaces or not. So again, here it's important to keep control of your price, images, your brand image, and the picture you will deliver to really are consistent between the different channels you use. Then the last one is the direct to consumer. Again, here 3 options. Option 1, there is no possibility to buy your products online via your own website. Option 2 is that consumer can buy the product on your website. So that's the right side you can see. So it means that they can really buy your goods or services on your website. And the last option is what we call the hybrid model. It's like a kind of click and collect, or you can also use like plugins. With the hybrid model, maybe it can be easier for you if I show you an example of hybrid model. See here on this slide, you can see L'Oréal, for instance. So L'Oréal don't have any web shop, active web shop, but you can see that they will promote their product through e-tailers, or here you can see Amazon and Walmart. So it means that when a consumer selects a specific product, they will arrive on the product page of the e-tailer. So it's also important to offer this seamless experience to the consumers. So what can I tell you about the e-commerce strategy is that the choice is will determine the degree of brand control you want to have, the investment to be made, and of course the organizational readiness of your company. The more brand control you want, the more you will need to invest money and also hire people having the right skills to help you to be successful. So if we want to recap the different strategies, the first one is that there are 3 main strategies for brand to sell online. So we saw it, the e-tailer, marketplaces, and direct. Each of the options have different levels of control for the brand and also the maturity level. The e-tailers take care of traffic generation and logistics. the marketplaces are really interesting to kickstart your e-commerce, but only if your brand is already built. And also another important aspect is that your product assortment is available in a high quantity. And last but not least, the direct-to-consumer e-commerce business models. This requires a high IT and investment, but also cost to build traffic, but you will have the benefit to be really in full control of your brand. So I hope this was clear, and the next part is about cross-border. So if you have question about yes, okay, nice.
We received some questions. The first one is regarding PayPal. What are you thinking? What do you think is the future of PayPal as a payment method?
So PayPal is quite popular in other countries, for instance, in the UK and the US. But in Belgium, they really face the high awareness of bank contacts because it's used offline as well, and the trust of the consumer is really high for bank contact. So it's kind of complicated for PayPal to really be more present on the Belgium e-commerce web shops.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, isn't it an advantage to work with a specialized marketplace? So for positioning your product and so on.
Certainly. So I show you a lot of different marketplaces, but those are kind of generic marketplaces. But you also have like specific marketplaces for fashion, for electronic or whatever. So it's really important in your selection of your marketplaces to really have a fit with your brand, but also with your industry. So a popular one is Cdiscount in France, and it really works well with fashion industry. If you think, for instance, about other marketplaces, maybe quite smaller, but really niche in their industry, is La Redoute, which is also quite performing well in the fashion industry again.
Thank you. And I have a last question. Can a web shop host on Shopify be considered as direct?
Yes, sure. That's of course. If you work with Shopify, it's a platform, so it's still your own web shop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then the next part of yes, I forgot here. So again, here, if you need some more insights about e-commerce strategy, if you have a question, you can really use the Canva here that is available on our website. And the e-commerce Canva contains key questions to deep dive into 9 different aspects of e-commerce. And the answer you will give to those questions will really guide you to design your successful e-commerce strategy. So do not hesitate to have a look at this Canva. So the next topic for today is cross-border e-commerce. What are the key challenges and best practices in terms of e-commerce? Maybe that can be a question to ask.
Yes.
Indeed.
Are you already active in cross-border? So a few of our participants have already a web shop, but for those having it, are you already active in selling cross-border? So a few seconds, I think it will be, we will see the results. So No, mostly selling only in Belgium.
Okay, clear. But no worry, even if you are not already active cross-border, this section can also be relevant to understand a little bit why you should start cross-border, why it can also be relevant to grow cross-border. But first, what do I mean exactly by cross-border? So cross-border refers to companies that are selling their goods or services to other companies or consumers that are located abroad. So it's applicable for B2B, but also for B2C, of course. Do you have any idea on what Belgium web shops export cross-border? We hear a lot that what you can see a lot in the newspaper is that Belgium consumers shop a lot in the Netherlands, in France, and so on, in the US or even in China. But there is also an important part that happens in Belgium, meaning that international consumers will also shop on Belgium web shops. So what we can see from the e-commerce barometer, we found some interesting insights regarding cross-border. The first one is that cross-border sales represent approximately 16% of the transaction value, so the turnover. That's 1.4 billion euros of goods and services that are exported abroad in 2020. It seems to be a lot. Well, yes and no. What we see in 2020 is that cross-border sales contracted, so there was a big decrease of 31%. So last year cross-border represented, last year in 2019, sorry, cross-border represented 25%. So here in 2020, it's only 16%. Why this big decrease? It's again because of a lot of uncertainties regarding logistics, but also due to the crisis. Also challenges related to the pandemic that slowed down the cross-border expansion, and most of the time it was really for the big merchants that were heavily impacted by this decrease. So we also saw a lot of national initiatives, like we saw it in Belgium as well, like Buy Local. Of course, the other countries did the same, so it has then a negative impact on cross-border. But despite the slowdown of cross-border, e-commerce remains quite attractive. Why? Because the average basket value is higher. So remember, the domestic average basket was 82 euros. Here for cross-border, the average basket value is more than 145 euros. So who are those international shoppers? Well, 50% of those shoppers are from France or the Netherlands, quite obvious. But you can also see that there are also other countries that are other consumers from other countries that shop also on Belgian web shops, like in the US, UK, and Germany as well. So maybe an interesting fact is that American and also Canadian consumers spend really a lot. So the average basket for those shoppers are more than 350 euros. So it's quite of interesting to target those markets if it's relevant again for your brand and your product. But to do that, you need to have a well-executed strategy to be successful in cross-border. So for instance, understanding the local consumer, the behavior, securing product market fit, and also adopting a kind of test and learn mindset to really crack the cross-border e-commerce. But there are many factors to consider before entering a new market. So not that easy to be successful in cross-border e-commerce. What I will show you now is a survey. So last year we also conducted a survey specifically on cross-border. So this survey, we asked the Belgium companies, more specifically the e-commerce managers and the marketing managers of Belgium companies, if to explain us more about the challenges to go or to start cross-border. They also share with us the channels they think are relevant to start cross-border, but also the countries they prefer to expand to, and much more. So let's have a quick look at this survey. The first observation we can see is that almost 2/3 of the Belgium companies consider cross-border e-commerce as relevant. So we ask them really the question like, do you consider cross-border e-commerce as relevant for your company? So those who consider it irrelevant mention the following reasons. Mainly because they focus more on building their local brand on the Belgian market. Also some agreements with other companies that then are more active cross-border and they just focus on the local market. The legal constraints as well, but also think about the languages that are complicated to manage, the logistics, the foreign pricing standards, and so on and so on. But if we zoom, we can notice that there are some striking differences between the SMEs and the big corporates. So while 77% of SMEs think of cross-border as something being relevant, for corporates it's more 50-50. So it means that for corporate clients, we see that they have different entities in different countries or region of the world. So it means that cross-border sales could lead to a kind of cannibalization. So every country will take the lead in his domestic market. For SME, of course, it's not the same. It's easier to sell cross-border than to start up separate entities abroad. Then a second observation, so 2/3 say yes, it's relevant, but only 3 out of 10 think it's really a strategic priority to grow. So even if they think it's relevant, it's not the key priority. Also remember in 2020 it was a challenging year, so probably if we have to do the survey again maybe next year, the answer will be quite different. So what we can also see is that many actually take the leap. This could be related to the maturity level of the company as well. So cross-border seems to be complex, but what exactly is complex in cross-border? So we ask again here the question to the panel, and the main challenges that pops up are the local competition, the logistic aspects, and the evaluation of the market potential. So the fact that 7 out of 10 companies do not see cross-border as a strategic priority could be due to those specific challenges. So defining a unique value proposition to differentiate from the competitors is also difficult when you are active cross-border. But also think about the logistic and distribution to the new market. It's important to choose a a local player, or to see if you need a local or central warehousing. And also you need to know more about the consumer expectation in terms of delivery. The third place is also what we see here is the market potential. So really, which means that the companies struggle to estimate the size of the market potential. So they don't know if it's really key for them to grow on this specific market. And if we zoom in, we notice differences between the B2C and B2B companies. It's quite obvious, but the main challenge for B2B companies is logistic and distribution, while for most B2C companies, it's more the local competition. That's what we can see in the survey. Another observation is what are the countries they want to expand to. So Belgium companies have a clear preferences for the Netherlands and France. A reason might be that the cross-border challenge are more limited than in other neighboring countries. So for example, the language barriers, they are lower than in Germany, for instance, and logistic could be also easier to set up than in the UK, for instance. What we also saw in the e-commerce barometer, remember, is that those countries, the Netherlands and France, are already, those consumers are already quite active on Belgian web shops. So it makes also sense to export to those countries as well. But aside those neighboring countries, the United States and China are also indicated as preferred countries when it comes to going outside Europe. So what I will recommend you is to set up small experiments in the different countries you think that are relevant to grow. So by doing experimentation, you can confirm or reject your market potential and see really if there is evidence or you need to adjust on different aspects. So it can be your value proposition, your pricing, or whatever. So France and the Netherlands, preferred countries to expand. Let's see if there are some differences among our regions. And of course, not surprise, if we zoom in, we observe that companies that are active in Flanders show more interest to expand in the Netherlands. And yes, of course, then the companies that are active in Wallonia prefer to expand in France. So, of course, it's related to cultural and geographical proximity, the perception as well, and also the perception that there are less challenges to go on those specific countries. In the previous section, we saw together the different e-commerce strategy. Remember, e-tailer, marketplace, and direct to consumer. Now we can see in the next slide the preferred channels to expand cross-border. So here what you can see is that the preferred channel to expand cross-border by far are your own web shop, but it means also if you think that cross-border is a priority, you probably have already a certain maturity in terms of e-commerce. Although to set up, like you know it now, that to have your own web shop, it requires a lot of resource, intensive IT costs or whatever. But it's highly valuable to have your own platform. A second choice for the channel mix is the social commerce, so the social media platforms, which helps to connect with consumers in a kind of non-intrusive way, and it's kind of easy to start this, and it's also shortened the customer journey, so they can really then shop on their preferred social media platforms. The third-party channels, such as the e-tailers and the marketplaces, are both preferred by 25% of the panelists. So it's still quite relevant to use those channels as well. And again, if we zoom in the difference between SMEs and corporates, we can see that SME really prefer to start with social commerce and also to have this hybrid model because it requires less resources as well. So hopefully you are still with me. Here, what are the key conclusions in terms of cross-border? The first learning we saw is that you need a well-thought strategy to expand cross-border, as you needed an e-commerce strategy for your domestic markets. It's also true for cross-border. The second learning is that the biggest majority of the second learning is the key challenges you might encounter when you start cross-border are dealing with the local competition, logistics, and have a clear view on your market potential on the different countries you want to expand. A third learning is that the biggest majority of Belgian web shops consider to expand to the Netherlands and to France. So it seems quite obvious. But again, here it's important to have this test and learn mindset and to validate the evidences you will have during those experimentations. A fourth learning is also the direct model and social commerce are really the preferred channels to expand cross-border. And a last learning is, like I mentioned, that the SMEs really prefer to expand through social commerce, so the social media platforms, where corporates prefer more traditional channels like their own web shops, so the direct model. So first, what I can recommend you to start cross-border is first have a look at how to start cross-border. So you need to see if cross-border is relevant for your company and ask yourself some question like, is it possible to sell your goods and services in another country? Then you need to see if your company is mature enough. You also have to list different countries you consider and analyze their potential and challenges. Then another important aspect, you need to see if where you want to play. So again, having a test and learn mindset is really key, and try things, have the growth marketing mindset to see if it makes sense to expand and invest in those specific target markets. And last thing also is how to win. So here again, it's important to make a plan to overcome the challenges you expect. So if you think about what will be your value proposition to differentiate from the local competition, Again, here which channels you want to use to target your audience and really understand the customer expectation and behaviors, because they'll probably be different than the domestic market. So here again, if you look for more insights regarding cross-border, you can find the full report on our website, but also some other inspirational articles on our blog. I show you here two articles. One is about Nookies. Nookies explained us their cross-border strategy and how they grow cross-border thanks to specific marketplaces. And then another one is an interview with Bol.com. They explained in a non-commercial way the advantages of selling on an online marketplace. Then to continue on the cross-border topic, I would like to now speak more about the payment methods, because the payment is an important moment of truth. It's the end of the customer journey, and in the end, it's your sales. Huh? So why does the payment method really matters, especially cross-border? Because what we see is that up to 42% of consumers are likely to drop if they don't see their preferred payment methods at the end of the journey, so meaning at the checkout. Those percentages are quite different across countries. So 36% of drop-off in France, 37% in Germany, and 42% in the UK. So you now understand the importance of local payment methods, or at least understand the payments habits of local consumers. So to grow cross-border, first you need to know cross-border. In Europe, it's a complex continent. There are 44 countries, 743 million people, so potential buyers, but also 23 million businesses, and a lot of different languages and also different cultures. So it makes the Europe quite complicated to really expand. So, however, it's really important to realize that even if you think that credit cards are, of course, accepted everywhere, it's not the preferred payment methods in every country. If you think for Belgium, for instance, we saw it for the e-commerce barometer, Bancontact is really important as payment method. Let's now focus on specific countries. So I selected 4 countries in Europe to grow. The first one is France. So the French e-commerce represents a sector with more than 100 billion euros e-commerce. So it's a huge market. And what we know about France is that Carte Bancaire, the French local team, it dominates really the payment landscape. So if you really want to be successful in France, you really need to accept Carte Bancaire. Another important country is the Netherlands. It's one of our preferred country to expand cross-border. And they have a strong and mature domestic market, but they are quite open for cross-border. They have a size of 25 billion euro market size, so quite an important market as well, and they are still growing. The average spend in the Netherlands is a little bit lower than in France. So in France, it was almost a little bit less than 2,000 euro. Here for the Netherlands, the average spending is about 1,180 euros. And the cross-border part is quite low because their domestic market is quite mature. But they are still are open to buy cross-border because they want to have the best price. So the top countries are Germany, UK, and Belgium. So that's good news for us. And specifically in the Netherlands, I don't know if you know it, but they have a really preferred payment method, which is called iDEAL. So iDEAL has been developed by banks, and if you don't have iDEAL in the Netherlands, you probably won't convert Dutch consumers. So again, here it's really key to offer the preferred payment method to convert. Then the next country is UK. They are less likely to shop abroad, but still it's really a huge market, 178 billion euros. So it's really an important European, or let's say, outside Europe market. And what we can see is that the Brexit hasn't really now an impact on e-commerce. We saw it in the e-commerce barometer. It's still a lot of British consumers shop on Belgium websites. Quite curious to see in 2021 if they will still buy a lot on Belgium web shops. What we can see in terms of payment is that it's a country dominated by credit cards. So it's maybe easier than here. If you offer a MasterCard or Visa, you will probably be quite successful in the UK, besides the fact that you need, of course, to have a clear value proposition and so on. The next country I want to focus is Germany. So here again, it's a big country. They have a size of 96 billion euro and still a growth of 10% a year. They are quite open to shop cross-border, so that's also good news. And their average spending is lower than the other countries. It's only 883 euros. But they really like to shop on international web shops, especially from the US, UK, and also Chinese web shops. It's a specific market in terms of payments because they have a lot of different payment methods, so it's kind of fragmented market. As you can see, non-credit card payments such as the SEPA direct debit, Sofort or Giropay really accounts for the majority of those online transactions. So here again, it's really key to have a good payments mix to offer the preferred payment method of your consumers. So I hope you learned a lot about cross-border and that you find some actionable tips and tricks to start cross-border. So I don't know if you have some question regarding cross-border.
I received some other question, not especially about cross-border, but if you have some advice regarding suggestion of, for example, is there a website where we can check if we can sell product on e-commerce, if we need certification, everything, to check if you have the possibility to sell your product on a specific markets?
Okay, here again, it's more a legal question. So I know you can find a lot of information on websites from marketplaces. So Amazon and Bol.com have a lot of information about legal aspects of selling cross-border. So maybe you can find some interesting insights on those websites.
And another question is, Do you know any third-party companies to which we can externalize all the logistic aspect of e-commerce?
So you mean then one logistic partner
logistic partner, yeah,
that can take care of all your logistic aspects.
Yes.
I would recommend
for SMEs. Yes.
specifically for SMEs. I know partners like DHL have really a broad offer, but there are some third parties, and you see it a lot. That's a really specific trend we saw in the last year. Specific suppliers that can help you to find local logistic partners. So if you think, for instance, about the last mile, which is sometimes the most expensive and the most complicated one, you have a lot of alternatives in terms of logistics, and those third parties can really help you to see what are the different local suppliers you can work on the different markets. So I will recommend to really work with a third party if you are really active in a lot of different countries. Then it makes sense to work with a kind of middleman. We can really advise you on the different countries.
Many thanks, Julie. I think we didn't receive any other questions, so many thanks for this presentation. So people can still contact you. I think yes, you have not finished your presentation.
Yes, not finished yet. So I think we still have some time, but I will go quickly. So yes, best practices. I know some of you love it. Here I will share with you some 8 best practices in e-commerce. Some may be quite obvious, but it's always nice to have a kind of refresh and also see some inspirational cases. So let's start with the first one. The first advice would be to reduce the number of steps to become a customer. So you see here an example of Revolut Bank. They first started their journey with 8 different steps to become a customer, and they saw a lot of drop off, of course, because it was too long. And what they did is to make this journey shorter. So what you can see on the right side is that now they only have like 5 different steps to become a customer. So it's really important, again, to make this customer journey as seamless, as shorter as possible. And also think about what are the data you will ask. Do you really need to have the birthday for a first order? Probably not, but this is maybe something you can consider for a second order. Then you can do some progressive profiling and really enrich your data step by step, but not asking all the data at the first time. Another tip I would like to share with you is the frictionless checkout experience. What we call the so-called invisible payments. I think most of you probably are familiar with Amazon's click checkout, and good news is that it's now possible to use it as well for you. So that's what Domino Pizza did. So they created an app, and they know that most of their consumers really ordered always the same pizza. So what they did is when you open your app, so you are identified, you have 10 seconds to validate the same pizza. So it's really very, very easy to order the pizza you want. So it's maybe quite of extreme and probably not relevant for all business, but here again, think about how you can really facilitate the checkout experience. Think about subscription, for instance, if it's relevant for your business. This also will help you to again lower the barrier in terms of checkout. Then a third tip I would like to share with you is the importance of visual search. Here in this example, the visual search seemed like kind of obvious for this client, Wayfair. So it's kind of easy for customers to upload a picture, for instance, for furniture, and see if the Wayfair can have a kind of look alike, and suggest then furnitures that are kind of the same that you just uploaded your picture. Then tip number 4 is the use of social commerce to avoid long journeys. So today, successful brands are not only seeing to grab attention of social media, but they really also sell on social media. And what we see also is that consumers are more open also to really shop on Instagram or on Facebook. So the trust is there. So it's also easier for consumer to just shop on social media and avoid to have additional clicks to go on the website. Then tip number 5 is using conversational commerce. So what is conversational commerce? It's e-commerce through chat. So mainly Facebook Messenger, but also WhatsApp. And if you are active in China, another conversational commerce or messaging app is WeChat. So again, here it's very easy then to really convert. And we did a case with Base, and we developed a kind of chatbot integrated with a payment module in Messenger. So it was then kind of easy for the Base consumers to recharge their prepaid card using application like Facebook Messenger or even WhatsApp. So again, here it's about conveniency for the consumers. Then tip number 6 is depending on your business, you need to find creative ways to overcome the barriers. So think about technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, or whatever. It can really help to convert. So some people need to touch, to see the product, and the technology can really help. But also, if you don't want to invest in those kind of technology because it's still a high investment, you can also use videos. So here an example is explaining how your products work, or how you have to use it. It really helps again to convert. So instead of long text, long description that nobody will read, a video will really help you to convert and to really lower the barrier to shop online. Then tip number 7 is that you don't only focus on new customers. So of course, acquisition is key, especially if you start your web shop, but don't forget other opportunities like upselling, cross-selling, or whatever, referral campaigns as well, to really boost your sales. Here an example is with Uber that really tries to upsell and cross-sell their customers. And at the same time, if you really want to boost loyalty, you can also use like hyper-personalization to boost your sales of existing merchant. So good examples of companies that use hyper-personalization are Netflix, but also Amazon. So they will do recommendation based on your past orders, and it will be related to your interest or whatever they know about you. Again, here to use hyper personalization, you can use some technologies like artificial intelligence. It would really help you to predict in a more efficient way what consumers wants to buy from you. And last but not least, I share with you a lot of tips and tricks, but the key is maybe also to start step by step. So you don't have to implement all those technology from the beginning, but really, again, here have a test and learn mindset. So in the case of Messer, they started not really with a web shop, but only with having some online orders. Then there was this manual process, and they implemented step by step the payment in their web shop. So again, here, depending on the maturity and the type of service and goods you deliver, you can have a step-by-step approach. And yes, last but not least, I think it's really important to have the broader picture of your business. So we know that physical stores are really key also, and they still have their role. You can have like showrooming, you can have like web rooming. Those are really key to have this omni-channel strategy if you are active online and offline. But also think about the fit of your brand positioning, the sales approach you want to deliver, and so on and so on. So again, here I would say one key web landing page you can find on our website. It's what we call the e-commerce corner, when you will see the different reports I share with you during the webinar. And you can download all those templates to really help you to build your web shop step by step. I don't know if we are still, no, I don't think we have still time for questions.
I have only received one last question, so maybe we have time for this last question. It's do you know which works more in fashion sales, Instagram or Facebook?
I would say
products.
both. Yeah. I would say both. So with Instagram, what we see that works quite well in fashion, but also in the food industry, is working with influencers. You can find a lot of agencies specialized in influencers, but also with micro influencers. And again, here it's really important to have the fit with your brand. So see what kind of influencer can really help. But Facebook is also an important channel to convert. So here I would say the answer is more like, where is your audience? And probably your audience is on both channels. So I would recommend to use the two different social media platforms.
Okay, thank you very much. So it was the last question. You answered to all the questions during your presentation. So many thanks for this presentation.
With pleasure, and thanks for the invite.
And so you have a last word to say, or?
Yes, so if you still have a burning question on e-commerce, do not hesitate to reach out. On this slide, you can see my email address or my mobile phone number, or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I will be happy to help you.
Many thanks, Julie. It was really interesting. And so our next export talk will be next Thursday, and the topic will be over the international risk management. So many thanks to everybody, and see you next Thursday and Wednesday for the specific topic about e-commerce in Turkey. Bye.
Bye.